WNTN Radio, welcome back to Italy Echo. This is your host, Viviana Dragani, and today we will be chatting with Joy Salomone about poetry. He's a Midwestern-born poet, educated in both English and in nursing. He has spent nearly 20 years writing poetry, and this is his second book of poetry. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. At what age did you start writing poetry?
So I started when I was in probably 7th or 8th grade. I was 12 or 13. And I think if I remember correctly, there was a girl that I had a crush on or something in school, and I wrote her a poem. And I remember it was reasonably well received. Oh, this was very sweet, that sort of thing. So I think that kind of is where I started. I had probably been writing a little bit before that as well, and I continued to write. I was homeschooled as a child, and so I had a lot of time at home to read and write, and so then I kind of just continued that both into high school and into college as well.
Thank you. And what inspires you to write poetry?
Well, I think anything really can inspire anyone in the creative field to do anything the creative. But for me specifically, with this book, I wrote it over a 2-year period kind of during COVID. And so it has a mixture of, it touches on mental health issues with COVID. It touches on just the lockdown. It touches on the administration at the time that COVID was here. So there's some kind of political pieces, as well as working in healthcare during the pandemic and what that was like working as a nurse during this global pandemic. I think that anything really can inspire me because I keep multiple journals just kind of laying around my house at all time. And sometimes I get like a little blurb of something that I'm like, ooh, that's really good. And then I kind of try to expand on that.
Thank you, Joy. And please take us through the process of writing one of your poems.
So, like I said, I kind of keep journals and notebooks laying around. I have one by my bedside table that I use as kind of like a dream notebook, and then I carry around one, or I use my notes app in my phone. And every 2 or 3 months or so, I kind of gather all of those materials and flip through it, and I take out what I consider like my gems, or like the pieces that I really think are, well, ooh, I really like the way I said that, or oh, I really like the way that sounds, or I really like the visual of that. So then I take those little blurbs and I expand on those and try to create a poem kind of around that, whether it's the middle of the poem or the beginning or the end. And then from there, I enter into the editing process. Usually it starts with me sending kind of a rough draft of the poem to either one of my editors or one of my friends who's a poet who writes poetry as well. And we kind of kick ideas back and forth, and then I'll rework them. Usually the process for one poem can be anywhere from a couple months to even up to a year of just trying to hash it out. And sometimes I end up with something that I don't really like, and it ends up in a folder on my computer that is titled "Do Not Use." And sometimes I go back to those and try to pull pieces out. But yeah, that's kind of the process.
Thank you. Any poets who inspired you from the American literature or whatever?
So there are a lot of like classic poets. I'm a huge fan of Edgar Allan Poe. I read a ton of his stuff when I was younger. Obviously, The Raven's his most popular, but he has a ton of just great poetry. I really liked and enjoyed Langston Hughes when I was younger. Some contemporary poets that I read are like Maggie Willis and Danez Smith and Brenda Shaughnessy. Are some of my they're kind of newer poets. But yeah, I think it's interesting that when you get into writing poetry, one of the things that you find is that you enjoy reading it more. And so I would say in the last 5 years, I've really expanded some of the type of poetry I try to read. I try to read some French and Italian poetry. Every now and again, I try to read some Asian-inspired poetry. I just feel like anytime I can expand what I've read, I can expand how I write as well. As a creative, the more you read, the better you get, kind of that idea.
I'm glad you read Italian poets because I'm Italian, so
Awesome.
I'm very proud. Thank you so much. So, where can we find your books?
So I released them on Amazon just a few weeks ago, and if you just go to Amazon.com and search "Drop of Atom," and atom is spelled ATOM, like the molecule atom. If you search "Drop of Atom," it will come up. You can search my name, Joey Salomone, and I have both a soft cover version and an ebook version as well that you can find.
Awesome. Thank you so much for bringing poetry to our show. It is quite rare in 2022, to talk about poetry, and that's why it is so precious to me. I graduated in literature, in Spanish literature, so it's really a topic that I enjoy, and I wish you all the best.
Well,
Thank you.
thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right.